Hello and welcome to What's on Your Screen. I'm Matt Watts and I'm interested in the completely different ways we each interact with the internet. For example, I've got a screen lock app that I use to limit my time on certain websites and apps on my phone. It's called ScreenZen, it's free and it's brilliant. But I've found that when it locks the screen, there's this incredible moment of snapping out of being mesmerised and being forced to reflect on how you're choosing to spend your time. This was exemplified by opening Instagram the other day, replying to a couple of messages, and then just seeing a video start auto-playing. Halfway through the video, my 3-minute lock kicked in and blocked the app. So I was sitting there looking at the lock on the screen with just the last couple of sentences I'd heard from the video hanging in the air. Why Sean Ono Lennon would be the best one to get Paul pregnant. See my previous videos about why Paul is a woman. Anyway, today's episode isn't about outlandish Beatles conspiracy theories. It's about one of the many people who actively contribute to the 8th most visited website in the world.
My name is Andrew Spencer, and I edit on Wikipedia as acalamari, where I've been doing so since 2006.
Does it tend to come up in conversation that you are a Wikipedia editor?
So it tends to be more I bring it up if Wikipedia is mentioned. It used to be something I didn't talk a large amount about, because when I first started, I didn't really have any friends, and my friends were mostly online people, and it felt like an embarrassing thing to talk about. That was back in 2006, 2007.
So you would have been how old at that point?
I was 15 when I started.
Okay, right. So still in school.
I was homeschooled.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was why I didn't have a lot of many peers at the time.
But you say that's kind of changed. You talk about it more now.
Yeah, I learned to embrace it a lot more. I also made more friends on there. I went to Wikipedia meetups when my family moved back to the UK. So I went to the ones in Cambridge and Coventry, and there's still quite a few people I know from there still. In fact, I'm going to the wedding of one of them this year.
And would I be right in saying at one point you were in the top 1% of editors?
I probably was. Do you mean in terms of edits, overall edits?
I think so. Is that the metric that you'd use?
Yeah, I know. I think the highest I ever got to was like I was the editor with the maybe like 290th amount of edits.
Okay.
But obviously my position has dropped to like 700s, which is still pretty good, I think.
So I'm kind of interested to go back to the start. So you're 15.
Yep.
What's the first page that you edit?
It has been deleted now, but it was a trivia page called Lists of Similarities between Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5.
Okay.
And that was the first page I ever edited, and it got deleted for being fancraft.
Fancraft?
Essentially just like a fan page on Wikipedia.
I think I should probably warn you that behind the scenes at Wikipedia, there's a fair amount of jargon. Like any new hobby, game or industry, there are phrases that are commonplace to Wikipedians that sound impenetrable to outsiders. I know the word Wikipedian seems pretty self-explanatory, but I had no idea that that's what they called themselves until I met Andrew, who operates under a username that is a reference to a fish-headed alien race from Star Wars. So this is my equivalent of the Margot Robbie bubble bath scene in The Big Short. I'm here to decode some of the stranger turns of phrase that are just second nature to Wikipedians. So the word that we're saying here is fancraft. So fan, as in you're a fan of something, and then cruft, like the dog show Crufts. And according to Wikipedia, fancraft is a term sometimes used on Wikipedia to imply that a selection of content is important only to a small population of enthusiastic fans of the subject in question. The term is a neologism derived from the older hacker term cruft, describing obsolete code that accumulates in a program. Apparently, it's one of many topics that crops up in debates about what is or isn't considered encyclopedic and should therefore be included or excluded from Wikipedia. Anyway, this bubble bath is getting a little tepid, so bye for now.
If I recall correctly, I saw a mistake on that page, and there were two contributing factors that made me create an account. One was that I saw that error and I wanted to go and fix it. But also, I've been using Wikipedia for like 2 years. I used to look up my favourite celebrities on it, looking for pictures of the likes of Hilary Duff and Lindsay Lohan and Mandy Moore. I used to like Wikipedia for that. I'm not going to sugarcoat why I used to use Wikipedia. That was why. Teenage boy interested in my favourite pop stars. That was why. But I also did like to use it for looking up US cities and all that sort of thing. So pop stars and cities was the main interest.
You were homeschooled at this point?
Yes.
Did Wikipedia form a part of that education?
Oh, yes, yeah. Especially in later years where I kind of had to rely a bit more on teaching myself on matters around the world. Because my parents, that's a long story, not out of the scope of this interview, but I did use it to teach myself and keep myself informed. So I would edit Wikipedia and read stuff.
Do you mind me asking if they were aware of you participating so much in Wikipedia?
My parents?
Yeah. We can skip that if you'd rather.
It's a funny story.
Oh, okay.
Because originally my brother and I did keep it from them. And we didn't actually talk about it, but it was, when we lived in Southern Oregon, our local paper was the Mail Tribune. And they created an account on Wikipedia, and they were inserting links to their newspaper into articles. Now, that's technically against Wikipedia guidelines, rules, because you're not supposed to create a business account. So I blocked them, and then I emailed them saying, are you guys the Mail Tribune here in Southern Oregon? And they said, yeah, we are. Why? Sort of thing. I said, well, unfortunately, I've had to block your account because of blah, blah, blah. Oh, and you're my local paper because I live in Oregon. And a few days later, I got an email from one of their reporters saying, you're an admin on Wikipedia. Can we please interview you?
Oh.
And I was like, I want to do this interview, but there's absolutely no way I can do it without my parents knowing. So I went to my dad and said, I've got to tell you something. And he thought that it was going to be this really bad piece of news. I'm like, okay, what's Andrew going to tell me? And it was a case of, Dad, I'm a Wikipedian. I edit Wikipedia.
And how did you feel about that?
He was like, oh, tell me more. And that's what, so I told him what I've been doing on Wikipedia and then told him I've got this interview. This reporter wants to speak to me. And he said, well, we'll speak to Mum and all that. And they approved it. And this reporter came out from Medford, the biggest city to us, to go interview me at home about Wikipedia.
And was this reporter surprised to find a teenager?
Yeah. They were surprised to find a teenager, someone who was homeschooled, an immigrant, someone who lived out in the rural areas and all that. But I was front page news the following day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they actually did put me on the front page. So it's got, was it Whiz Kid Tracks Trolls Online? There's a picture of me with my feet on my dad's desk. 15 minutes of fame. In fact, just one day of fame since the whole Rogue Valley saw me on the front page of their paper.
Bubble Bath Matt back again. There are different types of pages on Wikipedia. There are articles, which are the ones most of us are familiar with. If you type Michael Jackson into Wikipedia, you're going to see the Michael Jackson article. Then there are user pages. Every user who has an account on Wikipedia has their own page, in much the same way as users on other websites like Facebook, Instagram, or eBay do. And a user page contains information about that user. Finally, there are talk pages. Talk pages accompany both articles and user pages. A talk page is where discussions are had between Wikipedians. So, on the Michael Jackson article, if you open it up now, you'll see just below the title that says Michael Jackson, there's a little tab labelled Talk. And if you open that tab, you'll see that there's currently a discussion going on about whether they should change the main image of Michael Jackson. User pages also have talk pages and are used as a way to communicate with the user in question, almost like someone's Facebook wall used to be, if you can remember that.
So I was looking at your user page, and it says that you, and correct me if I'm wrong, it says you're a bureaucrat and an administrator.
That's correct, but in the opposite order. I was an administrator first, then a bureaucrat.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Adminship involves blocking and unblocking people, which is self-explanatory.
What do people tend to get blocked for?
The most common one's vandalism.
Right.
Just making joke edits or destructive edits to pages, which is easily reverted. That sort of thing. Whether it's putting something like the word crap on an article, or blanking the page, or changing the picture of Paris Hilton to the literal Hilton in Paris, that sort of thing. Joke edits like that. Though there are more serious things like content disputes and point of view pushing. As you can imagine, Israel-Palestine has a long history of, or Azerbaijan, Turkey and Armenia. There's a long history of people pushing points of views either way, and it's an absolute minefield to try to organise and also keep under control. Essentially, on certain pages like that, and I think Donald Trump and Joe Biden are other ones in which you're limited to a one revert rule.
If you make a change to a Wikipedia page, that's called an edit. You might go to the Michael Jackson page and add his middle name, which is Sherman. Then someone else might go and change it back so that it no longer lists his middle name as Sherman. That is called a revert. In general, there's a 3 revert rule on most Wikipedia pages. This means you can only do a maximum of 3 reverts per a Wikipedia page per a day. It stops me constantly going in and re-adding Michael Sherman Jackson's middle name over and over again, while someone else keeps going in and reverting my edit. On certain pages that attract a lot of dispute, there's a 1 revert rule instead.
So actually, maybe I should take a step back. So before you were an administrator or a bureaucrat, is editor just the term for someone who contributes to Wikipedia?
So editor is the overall term for anyone. But yes, a regular editor or regular contributor is somebody who is not an admin, bureaucrat, or any position along those lines or higher.
Okay. And anyone can sign up to do that?
You don't even need to sign up. You can edit anonymously.
Oh, really?
You can edit any page as long as it doesn't have protection on it.
Okay.
Which is semi-protection, full protection, or pending changes.
So anyone can do it. And the fact that it's not a complete mess means that there is an army of people like you behind the scenes reverting these changes. And
yeah.
Okay.
The whole appeal of Wikipedia is that anybody can edit it. The argument to that is, well, how do the information's reliable? Anyone can edit it. But at the same time, Jimbo Wales, the founder, has always said, don't use it as your only source of information. Always make sure it's your base point. Always follow the sources. And, of course, remember, yes, anyone can edit, but also so can you. So if you see an edit, if you see a problem that needs fixing, you can fix it.
So the next step up from that is being an administrator. So you say you block and unblock people. When you do that, is that based on your decision? Are you thinking this person needs to be blocked? Or is that information coming from somewhere else?
It's a combination of the two.
Okay.
We do have what's called user warning templates, but they're usually for people who are vandalising. And even with vandals, there's a level of severity that you think, okay, this person needs to go immediately, or a case of this person needs a warning, see if they can be steered away. So, for example, if someone changes a word in an article just to put the word crap in it, that could just be someone joking around, messing about. And the chances are you could warn them and they'll be like, okay, I'll stop. But if someone puts something like racial or homophobic slurs in, you're like, we don't want this person around. So that's the case. So just block them. They're not here to contribute constructively. There's no point in engaging with them. They're just here to be hateful.
So how did you go about becoming an administrator?
Well, I became one in the days where it was actually pretty easy to pass. 2007 was the last and only time we had more than 400 people become an admin in one calendar year. And I had been an editor for 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
It was about 9 months, about 8 months.
So you're still 15 at the point that you got
I was 16 at that point.
Ah.
I had turned 16. But I made a first attempt at adminship in March of that year. I didn't pass, but I was like, I'll just work on the stuff people opposed me for, which was, people thought I was a bit immature, a bit thin-skinned when it came to vandals and all that. Nothing that was overwhelmingly bad or anything. So for the next 3 months, I just showed more dedication, showed a better understanding of policy and what it entailed to become an admin. Next time around, 104 people voted for me. Only one person opposed, and I was like, my parents don't even know that 104 people on the internet voted for me to become an administrator. So that's how I became one 18 years ago now.
Wow. I'm trying to work out whether it's more like having a job or almost being elected. It's like being in local government or something.
In a way, but on a top 10 website.
Yeah, it's bigger in a lot of ways. You could have more of an impact.
In a way, yeah. And in fact, some admin actions have been reported on. But there have been occasions where somebody has blocked like a US government IP or UK government IP, and that's been reported on. It's been a while since people are a lot more wary of not doing that. But that has happened in the past, and it's been reported in international media.
If you don't know, an IP address is a unique identifying address which indicates which network you're connecting to the internet through. So using your phone on your home Wi-Fi will give you a different IP address to using your phone on the free Wi-Fi at your local spaghetti shop. Usually, unless you're deliberately hiding or faking it, a website can see your IP address when you're browsing it. The IP address tends to give away your general location and makes it clear which network you're using. So if loads of different people at the spaghetti shop are vandalising the Wikipedia pages of Penne, Linguini or Tagliatelle, the admin at Wikipedia could see that it's all coming from the same network and block that network, meaning that no one using the spaghetti shop free Wi-Fi could make any more edits. As Andrew mentioned, this has actually happened, only instead of the spaghetti shop, it was the US House of Representatives, where people were, for example, changing Donald Rumsfeld's page to say that he was an alien lizard.
So when you've done other things in your life, like you've just done a master's or going for jobs or anything, do you bring up the Wikipedia work?
If it's relevant. Obviously, it's a bit more relevant in things like writing jobs and all that, purely because it involves that in editing. I have mentioned it in the occasional job interview. I know there was a job interview I went for a long time ago where a store manager asked me, what are your hobbies? And I mentioned I edited Wikipedia, and he said, tell me more about that. And I said, well, I've done it for a long time, and essentially said what I told you, and that I got elected there a long time ago. And he thought that was interesting, because he was like, well, to me, that shows dedication on your part. I didn't get that job because I actually turned it down for related reasons.
Oh, right.
But it was interesting feedback from him because he was fascinated by
it. So that took you to your next step, which was bureaucrat. So what's that?
So I didn't become a bureaucrat until 2014. Now, bureaucratship is probably an insane word to say out loud, bureaucratship. But it's one of those positions on Wikipedia that's probably the most overrated. When I became one, you had to have at least 90% support in the candidacy in which you were partaking in.
So when I'm thinking about a bureaucrat and a candidate, it makes me think of like a constituency. Who would that constituency be? Presumably it's not geographic.
The constituency is the entire world, and it's the editing community.
Right.
So essentially anybody from anywhere in the world who is a Wikipedia with an account, that this you do have to have an account for, can participate in elections on Wikipedia. Obviously, there are certain rules, like I think in some you have to have at least 500 edits. You can't just create an account and vote.
Right.
That's kind of seen as suspicious. But as long as you've been around for a few weeks or months, then you can participate.
And do people just do that out of a sense of it's part of their role in Wikipedia to pick people who are going to be good at this, or do you almost have to canvass for votes?
So on Wikipedia, canvassing is heavily frowned upon. And in fact, you can actually tank your candidacy if you do that.
Ah, okay.
At least it has been in the past in which people have asked for votes and they got shot down.
Right.
But also people tend to participate in those elections. A combination of interest, responsibility, as you've said, because they know the candidate. Occasionally people have access to grind. It is often used, unfortunately, as a revenge platform sometimes. If somebody has angered someone, they'll use an RFA, or RFB, request for adminship or request for bureaucratship, as a tool to get back at someone. Other times, people are the opposite and are like, oh, this person's an amazing editor, they should be an admin. Even if they're not qualified, they'll just believe, well, this person's awesome, they help me, and so therefore they should become one. So you get it from that way too.
Okay. So what is the actual job of bureaucrat?
So it used to be renaming users, but that was then changed to another user right called Global Renamer, which I also am. But bureaucrat now does what's called flagging bots, which essentially the easiest way to describe it is that you do have bot accounts on Wikipedia that do make hundreds of thousands of automated edits. And flagging it as a bot means means the system recognises it as a bot account, not a human account.
And they are allowed?
They're a crucial part of Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. Right.
You have bots that will tag copyrighted images. You have bots that will revert vandalism. Some have got like millions of edits. You've also got some that will tag pages for deletion under certain circumstances, or remove tags, or they'll fix outdated formatting, that sort of thing. So they're absolutely crucial part of Wikipedia.
Okay. And you're part of the team that contributes to the maintenance of this fleet of bots?
Technically not really.
Oh.
It actually takes special people with programming skills to actually make bot accounts. All we do is flip the button that says, yeah, this is a bot.
Oh, okay.
That's literally what it is. Or deflag it to say, no, it's not a bot anymore, this account's retired. But the most controversial part of bureaucratship, and why it's always had such a heavy level of support to actually become one, and why it's seen with so much, I suppose, respect, is because we're the ones who close adminship discussions and we close bureaucratship discussions. So, in simplest terms, okay, request for adminship RFA, request for bureaucrat RFB. But RFAs and RFBs there's a long-standing debate that they're not a vote, but at the same time, you need a certain percentage to become one.
Right.
But there's also what's called the discretionary range, in which there's a debate about whether this person has passed or failed. So at the moment, the discretionary range to become an admin is, I think it's 67% to 75%. So below 67% is almost guaranteed to be a fail. Above 75%, almost guaranteed to pass. But within that 8-point margin, that's where the debate occurs, where either a bureaucrat has to judge the consensus for themselves that this person passed or failed, or they'll put it towards what's called a crat chat, in which they and every other bureaucrat will discuss if this person passed or not.
Every other bureaucrat?
On the English Wikipedia, there are 15 bureaucrats, and there used to be over 50 of us.
Is there a hierarchy, or is there just a collection of different roles?
People on Wikipedia will say, "Oh, there is no hierarchy," sort of thing, but in reality, that just doesn't happen. It's like admins technically have no more say in content than a non-admin does, but in practicality, that doesn't work out. You will get people who will defer to an admin's judgment purely because they're an admin, even if they may be less qualified on a topic. There was a case of that years ago, in which I can't remember the subject now. It was a long, long time ago, in which I did participate in something, a discussion about certain content, and a couple of people said, "Oh, an admin's decided," and I said, "Hey, step back. I've participated in the discussion, given my opinion, but I haven't decided anything."
Right.
The community, we haven't come to a consensus here. This is just me speaking as an editor, not as an admin. Bureaucrats, again, technically are considered above admins, even though we really shouldn't be, but due to the sheer amount of support we need to become a bureaucrat, and given our job role, we are seen as higher ranking and almost a separate form of editor in ourselves. In fact, a lot of bureaucrats tend to not edit a lot. Somebody referred to us as the Wikipedian's retirement home.
Okay.
But we've also been referred to as the Jedi Council, so...
that's a more flattering one.
Yeah.
This might be quite crude terms to put it in, but it sounds like, certainly at the point where you were participating a lot, you were a fairly big deal on Wikipedia?
Back in my heyday,
Okay.
I was. And then I remember there used to be a time when people would be coming to my talk page every single day with stuff. But I'm not as prominent as I used to be, mostly because I became more active in the real world through things like education, work, relationships, that sort of thing. And I've had less time to edit. But I make sure I edit at least a few times a month. And I always read the important discussions. So if there's an adminship request up, I'll make sure I'm following that for the whole week. It's progressing. Same if there's an RFB. Even though I may not be editing as much as I used to be, I'm making sure I don't fall out of touch with what the community wants from me.
In general, it sounds like work is driven by the editor's interests or compulsions to correct something rather than having anything assigned to them.
Yes, you're not assigned anything. You can just edit what you want. It's like my Swifty friend, Harry. He goes all the way around Britain taking pictures of various monuments and bridges and buildings and war memorials. He's taken dozens, if not hundreds, of pictures of various monuments and buildings across the UK to put into Wikipedia articles. I think on the Cenotaph article, one of his images is on there. Because it's one of his interests, that's what he does.
I like that. It gives you a little mission to go out and do something to contribute to this global resource.
Yeah.
That sounds very satisfying.
It is. And like I say, I've not really created much in terms of articles, a lot of content. But of course, after I've edited something and made it better, for lack of a better term, it does feel good. And you think, well, that's more appropriately written now. It's more encyclopedic. It looks better for the viewer. It does feel good. But I know for people who've actually got their articles to featured status where it's on the main page, they're like, I did that. My work is on it's technically collaborative, but obviously you're going to have like one person who is the primary driver behind that. And they're like, I helped get that onto the main page.
So what would you say is your proudest Wikipedia moment? Or achievement, perhaps?
In terms of what I've done for other people, it would be those I have nominated for adminship and bureaucratship, and anybody I coached to become a better editor. I know back in the day, there were people who needed a bit of help, so I gave them guidance, and they went on to become seasoned editors before, of course, they eventually moved on to other things. But in that time, they were heavily active. They'd had that babysitting / guidance from me that had helped them become what they became. In terms of an editing decision I made that I was proud of, that was unfortunately, that was hard to think of because unfortunately, since I've been around there for so long, I
think that says a lot. That what comes to mind first for you is a very community-spirited approach of helping other people. Because before this interview, before I kind of knew your personality and your approach, I'd almost expect someone to answer that question with, I was the first to edit this, or I made this page before anyone else did. And you can't even bring any of that to mind. It's all about just helping other people.
Now that you've prompted me, there actually is one thing that I did receive first before anyone else. And when I became an administrator, somebody created this MS Paint version of a t-shirt with I'm an admin, and all I guess this crappy t-shirt written on it. And I was the first recipient of that. And it's a tradition that still happens to this day, in which people, when they become an admin, someone puts on their talk page an image of this MS Paint t-shirt with that on. And that did start because someone gave it to me.
So I detect so much warmth and community spirit in the Wikipedia community, but there is conflict.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. I won't sugarcoat it. There are problems too.
How heated does that get?
Obviously very intense, but obviously on articles that are of controversial worldwide topics, like unfortunately Israel-Palestine, that is one that does unfortunately have a lot of heated discussion from people on every single aspect of the situation.
Are there any that have affected the pages that you typically edit and frequent?
Not really, because I tend to stick to pop culture and cities. So there's not really a lot in terms of my quote-unquote sphere of influence that I tend to worry about. It's more of a case of silly things like genre warriors. People like to make up genres to put into articles. Even Taylor Swift, which I follow, isn't really that heated. You get the occasional. I know there was disagreement on it a few months ago, but it got resolved.
What kind of disagreement?
I think it was over. I think it may have been over the image in her info box. I think it was that. It was either that or something about the genre or something. It was something that wasn't particularly important, but eventually it was resolved. So it's that sort of thing. But the really toxic stuff, I will admit I've never really felt confident about handling. So I've just steered away from it, and for me it's outside of what I like to do. I just stick to what I know and what I'm comfortable with. There's no obligation for me to participate in the hot topics or the controversial areas. I don't have to do any of that.
So as well as people rushing to troll, are there those who get a satisfaction out of getting there to get the accurate information in as quickly as possible, to be the one who registers the death of Michael Jackson? 100%.
There were those people too. For me, it's kind of ghoulish. I wouldn't want to have that. For me, it's not really an achievement. I mean, okay, you've added someone's death in. Great. Yes, for the sake of accuracy, that needs to be changed, but it shouldn't be a case of, oh yeah, I want to be the first person to write that such and such has died.
It's a strange time in the internet and our relationship with information. I know it's a bit of a big picture question, but how do you see the future of Wikipedia?
So, if you stopped all editing on Wikipedia right now, banned everyone from editing, it would remain a useful resource for several years. It eventually would become out of date in certain parts of it, like biographies and all that, and scientific achievements. But that base knowledge would remain viable for a long, long time. A lot of historical pages, a lot of pages like history, historical events, since not a lot of those changes unless there's a major breakthrough in learning about an old event. A lot of those remain viable for years and years and years. So I believe in that circumstance, that Wikipedia will last a long time. It's more of a case of, can the Wikimedia Foundation keep the lights on? Now, a lot of people I've spoken to, when I say people, I mean people who are more involved with the foundation than I ever will be, who are a bit more in the know, and who tend to keep an open mind. And as long as Wikipedia can fundraise and continues to adapt, it will continue to remain a resource for the foreseeable future. It's more in case anything unexpected pops up. Obviously, in the past few years, well, especially in the past 2 years, it's been AI. And Wikipedia hasn't been immune to AI edits. And when I say AI edits, I mean people using AI to create content and put into Wikipedia. But probably the long-term consideration Wikipedia needs to deal with is how to appeal to those who are younger and more TikTok-based and smartphone-based. Obviously, Wikipedia has had mobile for years and years. That's not the issue. It's more of a case of, unfortunately, adapting to, I guess, sound derogatory here, shorter attention spans. So that would probably be the longer term. How do you deal with that? It may be a natural change in which people eventually move away from TikTok and go back to, everything goes in cycles. After all, that same generation is also bringing back vinyl, bringing back CDs, bringing back physical media. So maybe it'll be a case of people move away from TikTok again, in which Wikipedia may not have to adapt. But for its own interests, I would say the better it can adapt to those sorts of societal changes, the better.
Do you think it might partly be... Wikipedia feels very desktop.
Yes.
I know it has a Wikipedia, it has a mobile site, but the social functions on there, even to me, felt dated. When I was learning about how user pages work to find you, to do this interview, it felt clunky in a way that might be very off-putting to someone who's used to the slickness of social media.
Yes, that is 100% an issue. See, for me, it doesn't make any difference. I'm used to using that interface for almost 20 years. So for me, it's just natural. But for people who are less familiar with that sort of interface and style of editing, or you're using the internet, that is going to be more difficult for them, and it may be more off-putting, as you said. So the risk of being outdated in terms of its technology is definitely a concern.
Do you think there's appetite within Wikipedia to change that?
That's, again, one of the downfalls, is that getting any sort of change on Wikipedia is very difficult, because you've got like 40% of people who want to change, 40% of people who want to leave it the same, another 20% of people who you've got to convince either way. In other words, it's kind of like politics in that sense, in which you've got those two big blocks and the bit in the middle you've got to swing to either side.
To end on a positive note, what do you think is the best case scenario for Wikipedia?
The best case scenario is that Wikipedia continues to remain a fantastic encyclopedic resource that anybody around the world who has an internet connection can use, can edit if they choose, as it continues to update with new information that people can use as a base source for any research they want to do. In terms of its outreach, again, that purely depends on other countries developing. In terms of its readership, it purely depends on how much of the world has access to the internet. So that's like any other website. But as long as it can overcome any problem thrown at it, as it at least tries to do, I believe it'll remain a viable resource for at least as long as it has existed so far. And I will continue to edit Wikipedia until they turn the lights off. So, or I get thrown out, which I hope doesn't happen.
Doesn't sound likely to me.
That was Andrew, also known as acalamari on Wikipedia. Have you got a favourite obscure Wikipedia article? If you do, please send it to me at wattsonyourscreen@gmail.com, because I'm always interested to know what is on your screen. It'd also be great if you could subscribe to the show, and if you've enjoyed it and you've got a friend who you think would find this episode interesting, pick up your phone now and send them a link while you're listening. I've got an extra little story to share with you before I go. The other week, I spent 48 hours without looking at my phone. I spent the weekend in Snowdonia, and I thought I'd have a little break from the internet. When I switched my phone back on to listen to some podcasts on the way home, every podcast contained a dynamically inserted advert about incontinence pants. So perhaps my phone assumed that the only reason I would ever go so long without using the internet would be some kind of catastrophic injury or illness that impeded my bladder control. Anyway, see you next time.